through. Okay, I see it live on my end. It always takes a good 30 seconds. Hello, universe, perhaps. Compulsively refreshing Twitch. Scheduled to go. Refresh the page. On both Twitch and YouTube. Super YouTube. Project. We are live on YouTube. Are we live on Twitch? We are live on Twitch. Is that how we get to live? That's how we get to live. Awesome. Mute myself. Cool. Awesome. Sweet. So hello, everybody. I'm Kyle. I'm the Director of Student Programs at Bit Project. I recently graduated from the University of Illinois, and I'm currently a software engineer. Graduated with a degree in mathematics and computer science. Today, I'm joined by Margaret, who I'll let introduce herself here.
Hi, my name is Margaret Staples, and I am a developer educator over at Twilio, working on the Twilio Quest educational video game. I started working at Twilio about 3.5 years ago, and before that, I was just a mercenary software engineer for hire for like 20 years. So that's my background, and part of that, I got to be an indie game developer where I made no money, and so I think it's kind of neat that ever since I got this job, I am now technically an indie game developer for money. Living the dream.
That sounds amazing. Awesome. Yeah, we are doing a kind of mashup stream here on this Tuesday. We at Bit Project have a lot of initiatives for student programs, one of which coming up is our Bit Camp with Twilio for Twilio Quest, teaching intro to JavaScript. We do a lot of Bit Camps, which are free software engineering boot camps through Bit Project. We also have student programs where we partner and run courses at schools. We start student chapters and all those kinds of student activities that you would expect of an org like us, trying to democratize tech education, bringing expert experience and developer tooling to places that don't already have it, and supporting the people who are trying to start up their own communities. We thought that Twilio Quest as a unit is an extremely accessible and interesting way to get started in programming. It is quite literally a game and also an educational tool, which is, usually the kind of thing like, your 5 to 10-year-old like light bright, like, did you spell that right? No, not quite, but like brought to a whole new level where, college student, I just recently graduated. I'm like, oh, right, I don't remember quite how to do this on JavaScript. Feel free to like look back at the videos of me struggling in the past couple of weeks here, and you'll see like how it brings you to a good level of software engineering and checking into all that kind of stuff. I wanted to, since we have Margaret here, thank you so much for joining us. We always love the opportunity to talk with industry. Talk a little bit about Twilio. What is it? I know most people have heard of Twilio, but just kind of the top level, what is Twilio and what do you guys do for developers and such?
Sure. Well, I would say that when I first started at Twilio 3.5 years ago, everybody thought they knew what Twilio was. And when I would be like, so do you know what Twilio is? They would be like, yeah, you're the SMS people. And I'd be like, yeah, 8 years ago. And the thing is that like Twilio has always been like, it's founded by developers for developers. So it's not like we made the SMS API and then we're like, and we're done. Instead, we've just been expanding our APIs that the entire more than a decade that we have been around as a company. So now we're really a communications platform. Basically, if there's a kind of communication that's not face-to-face that you would like to integrate with your application, we have an API for that. But like also over the years, we've figured out that some people would like to make apps without writing code. And so we have been making more and more solutions to meet app developers wherever they currently are at, whether that's purely from like a design perspective or like purely from like a customer service perspective, or of course, the heart of hearts, our developer community.
It's amazing. Yeah. I always love the by developers, for developers, developers kind of mentality. I always love the engineering taken to a new level. Like, can engineering, the way that we're used to, like, programming in terminal on Vim, like these kinds of things, like GUIs are not useful at all. But we get to the stage that, like, my dad's working on creating an app and he doesn't know how to program at all. He's like, oh yeah, we've always had an engineer for that, but now, I can do it myself, and it's, empowering and all that kind of stuff. So
Well,
always love hearing about. Go
a
ahead.
lot of that industry gatekeeping is actually completely artificial and accidental. Even like there have been totally graphic focused programming languages that were fantastic. And a lot of our modern programming techniques, like under the hood, come from lessons that we learned from those languages. It's just that those didn't happen to pick up the fashion when fashion in technology moved forward. We often don't realize how much of what we think of as, oh, of course things are this way, is actually just really a series of accidents that led us to believe that this is how things had to be. So yeah, it's one of the things that I really like about the philosophy of Twilio is this idea of breaking down barriers to access being just core to our mission. And that's core to the Twilio Quest mission, is just to like lower that intimidation factor, which is so much of why people don't get into programming, and it doesn't need to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I also love the way that you put, like, things do not have to be this way, and everyone thinks of tech as like this just brand new shining thing. And it's like, yeah, there's like remnants that are like, 80s style looking stuff, and I love the like kind of throwback to, yeah, this kind of looks 8-bit 80s, or probably a little later than 80s. Speaking
No,
of,
you got it. It's pretty 80s.
About 80s. And like engaging in just a very modern, like actually approachable kind of way, and like engaging the people who like, this is all I know. I have a directory and I know how to edit a file, and you can do this in Notepad, and just save through the buttons, and it's amazing to get it approachable that way. I guess I'd love to hear the any examples of like those barriers that you break down. How do you connect to SMS messaging with Twilio was a huge barrier initially, and then you kind of continue to break those things down. Is there any kind of like unsung achievement that like, yeah, we did this and people didn't think it was possible, and now it's just totally the norm? Twilio's
all
broken
of it.
quite a few of those. Yeah.
Like that is the story of Twilio, basically. Like it's just been like an endless like series of that. Like, so you hit the first one, the first technical challenge that the founders, I of course was not part of Twilio yet. I did not know what Twilio was. But the founders originally wanted to solve the problem of bringing telecom communications into the internet age, because the thing was like the internet was becoming more and more the way everybody wanted to be connected with their data and be connected to each other, but we still had the telecom infrastructure being our broadest, most coverage all across the globe infrastructure for communication, and not being able to bridge those two together without like a master's degree in electrical engineering was a real downer. Because like those old telecom systems, those were expected like a 16-year-old in their garage to be able to like hack something together on it. That's not what they were for. They were for massive profitable corporations that like had monopolies over whole like regions of communications to like serve massive like communications infrastructure. It was never supposed to be end user friendly. And then there was the internet. And suddenly a whole bunch of people with that engineering mindset are wanting to solve problems. But this older generation of technology is so inaccessible because they never thought beyond having like a dozen specialists interact with it. They were like, why would we ever need for more than this dozen specialists to interact with it? We like all of our things being proprietary and being owned by us. That works for us. But then there was the internet. So that was the first thing to tackle, is just creating that I think that's what a lot of people have come to understand is the magic of APIs. It's just creating a software layer in between two systems of technology that don't necessarily line up natively because they weren't designed by the same person at the same time. And that's how these things work. But just creating a friendly interface that allows a broader utilization of a custom specialized piece of software. And so you put a friendly, I pretend to be on the web interface in front of this ancient crotchety old hardware, and suddenly anybody that wants to can start adding this extra layer of communication into their software application. And now it's not just available to the 16-year-old me in my garage, it is also now available to people in different industries and of different generations and with different educational backgrounds and in different regions, because you have broken down this completely unnecessary barrier. And it's just been like that forever. That worked out so well that we're just like, this is a good targeting system for us. Let's keep doing that. And like, seriously, one of the first things that I was told when I was brought on as a developer evangelist at Twilio was like, one of our roles in the communities that we're serving is to find out what the biggest pain points for developers are, because that's how we figure out what problem we want to solve next.
Yeah, I love. Sorry, go ahead.
That was actually the precursor. That was actually what caused me to throw a little party when I found out we were requiring SendGrid, because the one thing that I had heard, not the only thing, but the one thing I'd heard most from developers is like, be email too. We use you for everything but email. Be email also. And so I kept reporting that back to the company. And one of the things I love about that engineering mindset is, instead of just being like, we'll just build our own, we're just like, first, let's see if it's already been solved. Let's see if this is a solved problem before we re-engineer everything from the ground up. And sure enough, somebody was already doing a good job. And luckily, this is above my pay grade. I didn't have to do this, but luckily our exec team is mindful enough and considerate enough that they did the due diligence to make sure that the cultures would sync up reasonably well. And I have just loved the merging of the two groups, because like, I was scared at first, like, I don't want to lose my precious culture. I love it so much. But then like SendGrid came in and we were just like, oh, you're just like us, but email. Cool. So it's actually been quite lovely. New friends.
No, I love that. I always love the hearing about things in that way. I think I hear feedback. I don't know if it's from you or my Twitch or my YouTube windows. One second, let me close this. I still hear the echo. Is that from? One sec. How about now? Okay, I think it is on your mic. I don't know how to check that. Okay. Am I coming through your? Oh, you're not on head. I'm trying to think of a way to fix that.
I turned the gain down on my mic. Did that help at all?
Hello? I can still hear myself. This is working so well. We have to wait till we go live to find the tech issues, as always.
If you want, I can put my cans on. Would you?
Yeah, that may help. Just to not be allowed. Darn. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I'm just going to try not to spill water on any of my electronic equipment.
All good. Cool. Sorry, not to derail too much. I love the way that you mentioned. Is this a solved problem? Is a huge kind of almost like Renaissance providing opportunity. You know, I've been a hackathon student. Throughout college, attending more than a dozen kind of events, and you mentioned like not only are you breaking down the barriers, but we have an idea for an application and we happen to like notifications might help with this. You know, if you're trying to do it and you need to come back to it, you know, you get a notification when things are completed or someone's responded to you and you're like, oh, we need to like send messages. We have 20 minutes. We'll add Twilio to it. It's like that is not a like, that is the privilege of, you know, being my age, just having graduated oh yeah, that was like always in a box. Like, of course that was always possible. You always think like, oh, like the providers of broadband like trying to do this, like ooh, maybe you wouldn't trust them to build those APIs. And I love the kind of internet age, not only breaking down the ability to do it, but just making it easy to use, continuing to kind of iterate on it, take feedback the way you described. Like, yeah, you know, it kind of makes sense if we're sending notifications and you can just select phone or email. Like, yeah, that does seem like a good touch point there. So, you know, of course, like happy the feature is there as a user. And then moving forward, I always love that kind of thing. You had mentioned, and I love the phrase that you said, you're meeting the app developers wherever they are, and kind of finding that middle ground of this is something that we currently don't have and that they want. How can we provide it in a way that is reasonable to build and support? Obviously, if you want, you know, to drag and drop a full website, you can arrange it design wise. Like, you know, there are things that you would have to compromise on, I guess, as somebody outside of the company. How do and not only Twilio, but like the industry through your experience has been meeting all the specs and still not compromising on the product or, you know, what is the thought process going through there when you're trying to make something that is more accessible? What do you try to do to make sure the tool is still doing everything that it used to do or that you're trying to make it do?
Yeah, that's a lot of decision making to unpack, and there's no one size fits all answer to how that is done. And honestly, when I was a mercenary contractor, oftentimes those decisions were left to me, not because the organization had thought it out so well and decided that I was the best person to make that decision, even though I probably was, but more that by the time they had hired a mercenary contractor to come put out their dumpster fires, it was because everybody had decided to pass on ownership of these difficult trade-off decisions. So, as much as I have made that decision many, many times, I don't necessarily know that that was a good idea for that to be up to a random mercenary contractor to just be like, all right, let's make some tech trade-offs. Like I did that and it worked, but I actually much prefer being in an organization where there is a sense of ownership everywhere. Like as an engineer, I think we inherently tend to take a sense of ownership because when you're up to your elbows building something, it tends to feel like yours. I mean, even if you're just making like a spaceship out of Legos, at the end of it, that's your spaceship because you built it. So like that's just sort of like that inherent investment that happens when you're creating something from nothing. But I think that a lot of organizations tend to over time grow away from that sense of ownership because of course with responsibility for something comes consequences for that thing, and a lot of people I fear make their professional lives more survivable by distancing themselves from those hard decisions and those difficult responsibilities. And that's one of the things that I love about Twilio is there's this one of our core values is be an owner, and that Twilio is really on about its culture. Like I can reference that without looking it up because like it's not the first time I have heard that today because we are on about our values, which you kind of have to be for them to be more than just marketing talking points. You really have to just keep hitting them up and keep emphasizing them. And that's one of the ones that we emphasize a lot is be an owner. And it's really important when it comes to things like this, because I've been in meetings where it's not just everybody trying not to make this decision, but instead it's everybody presenting from their angle what the trade-offs represent to the customer's problems and solutions as they understand it. So you've got people in marketing talking about how this is going to impact the customer's ability to interact with their existing customer base, ability to serve their existing customer base. You're talking about engineers talking about the work investment in making things not break backwards compatibility versus I mean, when you have everybody trying to represent the best interests of the customers from the perspective that they best understand, that's where you're going to find the best solutions to those trade-off questions, because it's never going to be perfect. So all you can really do is try and be as thoughtful and mindful about the trade-offs that you're making as possible. And when you just throw it off on one person, they can make the decision as best as they can, but they only have their one perspective. You really need everybody with a different perspective and an investment in the issue coming to the table with their best insight, their best information, and pooling it all together and talking it around. And then you get somebody who's like, okay, it's up to me. Thank you all for your input, and this is where we're going to go with it. And it really does have to be the whole process. You can't take a little sliver of that and expect you to have good outcomes every time. Obviously, if you throw a dart at a dartboard, sometimes you will hit. But if you want consistent good outcomes, you have to put in the work, and there's no shortcut.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. It's really cool to hear like these same kind of terms, like be an owner as a core value is, you know, the same kind of idea that like, you know, for years we were putting on kind of student events at school and, you know, the kinds of events that Bit Project puts on, of course, as well. And you have that like, we're owners of this. And, you know, there are sponsors coming and they have expectations of us. And it's like, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we were just kind of hanging out in a meeting room here or a classroom after hours. And we're just kind of like putting plans together. And it's like, this feels very real now. Like, you know, you get that ownership kind of shock the first time around and you stay around for the second and third iteration. Like, all right, you know, all right, we have our feet under us. We know what we're doing. You know, that this idea works. And, you know, if you had a shortcoming and improving on that in the future, like, so yeah, we dropped the ball last year. We'll own it. And like, what can we do next to make it better next time? And that kind of, I love that the feedback session that you're discussing, you know, we've had dozens of times, both before and after issues might come up. And I love that, like, yes, that is the kind of foresight that, you know, we're always like, like we could have had that foresight if we had more time or if we had whatever. He's like, yes, that process is uncompromising to make sure that there are no flaws in that system. I love that the way that you kind of characterize that, like it is, uncompromising.
And you're right to call out that it's always iterating, because foresight is never 100%. Hindsight is 2020, but hindsight for this time is foresight for next time, because you always just got to be iterating for the better. And that's where that ownership and that willingness to discuss and learn from each step along the way really pays off, is in that iterative process. Just make it better every time.
Absolutely. And nowhere is that more clear than in engineering, where you can have an iteration cycle that is 7 seconds, with your hack. Did that work? Ooh, that one didn't work. Let me iterate on that and figure it out. I love the perfect segues we put here at Bit Project. So yeah, we're here for Twilio Quest. Twilio Quest is an amazing game. We can, I think it would be nice to, let me make this so I can share my screen. Share screen, this screen, Twilio Quest launcher. So Twilio Quest is a game that Twilio has created. Calling it just a game is almost feels like diminishing, in that it is an amazing kind of crossover as quite literally a game. You play Twilio Quest, an educational tool. Designers, programmers, and educators, kind of coming together to build. What very clearly feels like, has a scoring system and a ranking. You move around with WASD like a game does. But you're also working to learn new skills. I think I just skipped right into the JavaScript module, and you can kind of, check through all this kind of stuff. The product that is at the end of this is, quite amazing, both visually as a user experience and as a if somebody asked me, how would you recommend learning JavaScript, I would probably say this, unless you were already a programmer and already knew a language or two on top of it. Just as it is approachable, it has good feedback, it has good resources. You aren't, writing up what it says on another site. If Mozilla has a good recommendation system or explanation of something, you just point to it like the way an engineer does. And I really have vibed with this, more colloquially there. As this is a kind of cool critical thing, that tool that you can use to get on track with some basic training, kind of programming skills, Twilio messaging, a more specific kind of thing, and then open source development, always a big fan of. So I guess if you could kind of explain a little bit more the getting into Twilio Quest, the ideation and iteration that has gone with it, and then your take on what it means and what it is to you.
Sure. Okay, so this is originally the brainchild of my boss, Kevin. He's more of a teammate than a boss, really, but he does all of the awesome managery things for me, like getting information from other departments and going to meetings so I don't have to. Yay! But this was his brainchild, but actually before I was hired at Twilio. See, the Twilio the developer education team, one of the things that they have done for years and years and years is in the field training, super class, to where they'll go out and they will just host an all-day training event. And Twilio Quest, the last version was originally envisioned as the curriculum for these all-day training events. So it was originally envisioned where there would be developer educators in the room with the people going through, and it was not a fully immersive video game experience like it is now. The first iteration was a collection of tutorials in a gamification of this style. So you would go to a website and you would make an avatar, very much a similar thing, name your character, and then you would have the same kind of different blocks in different categories to learn from, but each one would just bring you to a list of little mini missions. So very much similar content, but without the fully immersive video game piece. But I mean, when you're working on a passion project as a side piece of a full-time job, you don't like spin up the last iteration first. You spin up the first iteration first. So that was what was spun up first. And it was successful. It was popular. People loved it. When I first joined Twilio, it hadn't been around for a billion years. It was still that first version. But it had hit the field more than once, and it had gotten good reviews. And when I saw it, because of my background as an indie game developer, I was like, I love this so much. And I was like, so I was hired as a developer evangelist. And I was like, can I take this on the road? Can I use this at events that I'm sponsoring? And they were just like, I have no idea how that would work, but yeah, do the thing. And so I'm an 80s kid. I grew up in arcades. And so I would put on a little like faux arcade experience at conferences using the Twilio Quest as sort of just like an async event on top of the conference. Like I would just be like, all right, anybody who plays Twilio Quest, come show me your points and I will let you pick out some of these awesome prizes. And I would just turn my sponsor table into an arcade prize booth with all these like kitschy little prizes. I have like a bajillion different like kinds of rubber ducks, because I don't know if you know this, but in some developer communities, the idea of a rubber duck is somebody that you just explain a problem to, and as you're explaining it, you figure out the answer. So you've just bounced it off your rubber duck. And so I had like a bajillion different styles of rubber ducks, and I had slinkies, and I had just like little bobblehead things, just and anything geeky and cute, and like 5 different kinds of slime, and just like all sorts of stuff. And it was just like every however many points you could trade in for prizes. And people were so into it. I was so delighted. I was like, people are just going to think this is dumb. But then they didn't, because apparently I'm not the only adult that's actually just kind of a tall child. So it was a hit, and it kept getting traction, and it kept getting good reviews for the developer education team, and it was getting good traction at the events that I was doing, and other evangelists started bringing it to other events, and it just got more and more traction, and the super classes just kind of got like more and more awesome. And then ahead of one of our big annual Signal conferences, Kevin got the go ahead to actually like make this his job. Like, how would you like for Twilio Quest to be your job? Like, huge win, career win. And that's how it became a fully immersive video game, and that's how it became a team, and that is how I got to join the Twilio Quest team that did not exist when I was first hired at Twilio.
Awesome. No, that's super cool. I love you mentioned the developer education team. Was that the previous name of the team, or is this now part of that team?
So,
Sorry.
So Twilio has something called the Developer Network, and it is a team of teams. And the Developer Evangelism team is part of that team of teams, and the Developer Education team is one of those teams of teams. Because at first it was one team, but as Twilio has grown, because this team has always been focused around serving developer communities, as Twilio has grown as a developer first, by developers for developers company, the needs of the developer communities have been served in more diverse and more nuanced and more deep ways, until teams have just spun up and spun off. And we've all stayed together, and we still like support each other. Like, it's not like we're totally separate, but it's like we have split teams for focus, just like you would for engineering projects. We do that for our developer projects. So like the developer education team spun off specifically to take full ownership and guardianship of the documentation. And that became also the training piece. And then, of course, the evangelism team has historically been conference experiences, but then also in the last several years, we have also been taking on more and more first-party events where we actually like host them. And we have kicked off a team specifically for like enterprise hackathons, because that's its own puzzle to solve. Is how do you serve developers where they work, not just where they are going for extending education, but in the very different stresses of the workplace environment. How do you engage them in a learning activity that's most efficient for them and allows them to be celebrated and show off their solutions in that entirely different context? So basically, that is how the team of team has and continues to grow.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the that process is very like I've been working for since June, so a couple months now, and I've already had a reorg of like, we're pretty big. We're gonna split a little bit, just for specificity. Like we're at 13 or 14 people. We can't have a daily meeting. We gotta gotta figure that kind of thing out. And I love that it seems that like it is for focus. It is for the right reasons that you're getting the opportunity to. This brainchild is now my job, and it's it gets to take on that different kind of life and iterate and continue to develop all that kind of cool stuff. I know what a developer evangelist is, but I bet a lot of our viewers might not. Could you explain a little bit more what that is and how that works in industry?
Developer evangelism is one of many names for the same vague category of job. And developer evangelist is one of the first things that this vague kind of job was called. And since Twilio was one of the first companies to have this kind of role, that's why we have the old name. But it's normally called developer relations now, or developer advocacy. And generally companies have an idea of the distinction that they're making by these terms. And of course, we have our own idea of what we mean by these various terms, but it's a role that bridges between a company's internal engineering and marketing drives and the developer communities that a particular company may need to interact with in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's because they provide a service or a platform or a product that the customer for is developers, or maybe it's that they are selling some solution that developers would need to implement, and therefore they need developers to be aware of it. It can be a technology, it can be a product, it can be whatever. But basically, the fundamental premise is that developers are not huge fans of commercials. And so if you try to market to us with your normal marketing techniques, we will go back to our computers and ignore you. And so if you really want to tell a developer something, you should probably send a developer. So that's the basic premise. And some companies don't specifically use developers, and some companies hire developers right out of school, and some companies only hire developers that have been developers for 20 years. Every company has their own idea of how this should work and what it should look like and which department it should be in and what kind of budget it should have. But the basic premise is that if you would like to communicate with developers, you should send another developer, or at least somebody whose whole focus is communicating with developers, because your standard marketing employees are really just not gonna.
Yeah, my first question to somebody with a product like this is usually not something that you get in your one-page memo of what is this product. It's usually like, how did you build that? And it's like, oh, like that's not, that's a hard question to answer if you haven't at least been a developer before, and that kind of thing. I always love the, like, I accidentally right-click during the game. I'm like, is that built like as a web app? Oh, it kind of is. Like, discovering these kinds of things. Like, all right, you're like, that's how this is working. And yeah, definitely a role that a niche that definitely needs to be filled. Things are built more and more that are not just, I am building a website for users. I am building a tool that builds websites for users. I am building a tool that helps you integrate your tool for building websites for users with another tool that builds websites for users. Like, there's a whole level of architecture built on top of everything. There's at least a half dozen XKCD comics about it. How does this tool?
There's another critical role that people in this kind of job can serve. I've certainly been called on to serve in this way, and teammates have certainly been called on to serve in this way. Sometimes when a company is deciding whether or not to take on a new software project or tool or platform or whatever, they will they will send one of their engineers to go figure out whether or not it works with their existing technology and their existing expertise and how feasible it is. And depending on the level of expertise and the background of that engineer, maybe your marketing person or your salesperson or even your sales engineer, it doesn't have the background to really answer those questions and to really dig into what solutioning is going to look like in the specific collection of cases. And so you reach into your communication developers. You're like, oh, people who I have asked to specialize in both communication and engineering, which one of you has a background that vaguely matches this problem space? And you get sick on it. And it's actually super, super gratifying to be able to go have those deep dive conversations with engineers that are out in the field solving real problems. It really lets you continue to feel like super engaged with that problem solving space, which is absolutely a satisfaction itch that needs to be scratched.
No, I totally agree. Yeah. And integrating these kinds of things into systems, even if they're kind of new companies, even if they're kind of new products, can always be like, will this work if we try to plug it in to one another?
Yep.
And it's always a scary question to ask if you really like, we need to plug something in, got to figure out how we're going to build a new tool or adopt one to get it into that space. I know where I'm going with this question, but I'll ask it as a question because it usually has the kind of opportunity for, are you looking for new developers with a tool, or are you trying to convince developers using one thing to switch to your either newer or better version? I can kind of tell with TwilioQuest, you aren't going at people who already have a lot of tech experience and are set in their one system. But could you kind of explain that kind of getting more users for your platform is not just a matter of convincing them to switch. It can also be building that community as a whole, and kind of the opportunity or feedback that you've gotten from TwilioQuest along with that kind of goal.
Okay, well, I think one of the things that's important to note is that Twilio isn't a product, it's a tool. And so like nobody's going to use a tool if they don't know it exists. So a big piece of what we do is just making sure that developers understand that this is a tool that's available to them. And it doesn't matter what level of experience a developer is for that to be a useful conversation to have, because that's equipping that developer to solve an entire category of problems should they run into them from now until forever. So that interaction is awesome no matter what stage at a developer's journey they happen to be at when you have that conversation. It's always a good conversation to have. The thing I really, really like about TwilioQuest, the thing that stood out to me as magical when I was deploying this in the field at events, was that it allowed developers to engage in the same event together across huge ranges of experience levels. When this magic truly hit me the first time, I was hosting an event in Detroit, and this amazing developer, she reached out to me and she was just like, "Hey, how do I get tech events in Detroit?" And I said, "Hey, you talk to me and we'll do one." And she and I have done many Detroit events since then. And basically, I just spun up a few, and then I was like, "All right, now you see how it's done. Go." And she has, because she's amazing. But this first event, it was a TwilioQuest event ahead of a conference. I was going to be in Detroit anyway because we were sponsoring a conference there. And so I'm like, okay, let's work together. We'll spin up a TwilioQuest event ahead of this conference. We'll put it in downtown Detroit so it's super accessible, as opposed to like the just outside of Detroit venue that's only accessible to the people that like have the privilege to have the money and the time off and the transport, blah, 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 blah. Instead, we'll put it downtown, super accessible, right near all the public transportation. We found a venue that was like a boot camp. So it was like, it was very well like structured. We catered it. So like, it was like, made sure there's vegetarian food, made sure there's vegan food. Like this is how you make sure that you lower all the intimidation factors. You take away all people's excuses that learning is too scary, and you just swing open the doors. And we had a packed house. And as I'm going around helping people get unstuck, I'm realizing that I've got people there who are 30 years into their engineering career, happily sitting next to people that are in their second month of a boot camp. And they're like happily working through, like they're not doing the exact same thing at the exact same time, but they're very happily working in TwilioQuest elbow to elbow, both of them learning on their own level at their own pace, and interacting across that experience gap in a way that is being beneficial to both of them. And I'm like, because those connections are freaking magical. So that is my favorite thing about TwilioQuest, is that it allows for those experiences. When you've got people across experience levels being able to connect and share experiences together, I think that makes everybody's experience of the technology and just of the world better.
I couldn't agree more. I love the kind of like getting down to the nitty gritty details of like, this is how you grow your community and make sure that it isn't like limiting to people. You know, I mentioned I was both attended a bunch of hackathons. I've ran hackathons at my school, and we get down to that detail. We get down to like what percentage of our meal needs to be vegan, what part needs to have no meat at all, what part needs to be, you know, all these kinds of things, like where does gluten-free go, all the details. We stress the details for sure. And we love that, you know, maybe 40% of our attendance will be freshmen, and a lot of them will be like, this is their first experience of a student event, let alone a hackathon, and they're like CS majors, but like they really just started coding. They kind of liked math in high school, and they're ready to like come to an engineering school and start learning some engineering. And it's weird to like, yes, you've taken a class by the time you've like attended this, but this is like, you are sitting shoulder to shoulder. We do a team matching process, and we try to get, matchings like that. Not 30 years of developer experience, but a couple years, and you're a senior and you're working with a couple freshmen and those kinds of things. Get some industry mentors in groups, and like that is just so enriching when you get to really have that connection, both genuine and about something like that is progressive here, that we're trying to build the skills and build the community that you're describing. Obviously, like for our student event, we're just trying to get people to start liking and enjoying coding, and like there are multitudes of things that you can kind of get out of an educational boot camp, and continuing to stress those kinds of things, continuing to share those experiences to make sure that other people can follow along. I love the way that you're kind of describing this. It sounds like everything is being done for the right reasons. I love to hear stories like this. I guess the question I'm curious about, I happen to pick the JavaScript boot camp because that's the kind of niche that we were looking to fill. As we have a couple boot camps in the works. We already have one on data science. We have a little bit of intro Python. What can we do next? And it's like JavaScript seems like a good spot, and we'll pick the JavaScript boot camp. I'm curious, inside of Twilio Quest, the team, or is it a little higher up that you're kind of deciding what project to pursue next? There's, I kind of scrolled through the options there, and there were quite a few. What decides the curriculum and the kind of next tool that you're working on there?
Well, the thing to know about the Twilio Quest team is that there are 4 of us.
Yeah.
And 3 of us write code. And one of those people is a manager, and one of them is me, who's also in charge of our community growth and experience. So the way we pick content is very carefully. Very, very carefully. The content that I have created is the OSS Elephant mission, and I really wish that I had gotten to spend a lot more time on that this year, because it has expansions in it that are not currently accessible to players, because I just haven't had enough time to get in there and get it polished to the point where it passes muster for how easy and seamless we want it to be for people, which still isn't perfect because there are only 4 of us, 3 of us write code. So it's really a matter of like, it's always triage. And as we're growing, we're getting support. Where the more players we get, the more budget we get. We're looking at maybe bringing in a contractor, maybe expanding our team. These are all on the table because we are seeing the benefit to our communities. But we're still growing. We're iterating. So right now it's all about. Do we have any events or programs coming down the pipeline that particularly need something that's on our roadmap? We always have a roadmap, and it's all about what floats to the top based on what's going to serve the maximum number of people that we can accomplish with our limited time and resources. That's always the name of the game, and it's always trade-offs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, picking that content, we're like, this probably only applies to 100 or so people that we have the reach to, but our boot camp serve 20 at a time, so maybe that's okay, because we'll still be able to run this, a half dozen times before we run out of people. So I totally agree that like serving the most number of people and where it'll do the most good are always fun things. I was just kind of curious to like, who gets to write the dialogue for these things? Like, it's witty dialogue in here. You get to write I love it. I've been the VOD for
me.
the like.
We write our dialogue for the different pieces. So all of the prose in the OSS Elephant is all me, and of course I think that's the most clever because I got to write it. But no, and like probably a lot of the prose that you're enjoying, that's probably Kevin, because he's probably written most of the text content in the game. And if it's not Kevin, it's probably Ryan. So that's because it was like one of maybe 5 people.
But no, I love the it's an engaging experience, and like just the extra touch of like even the dialogue's fun and witty and the kind of things that developers will say. And even if like I've been programming, I learned JavaScript once upon a time, and I'm kind of like politely relearning it I mean, I know JavaScript and I'm just like testing myself now, like relearning. It's like, oh yeah, like there's some good jokes in there for people who know what they're doing and are just picking up JavaScript or refreshing there. And I love the experience there is not just catered to, you don't know anything yet, let me just baby, everything here to you, but it's really engaging through and through and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that. I love the wittiness is still apparent even as you like scale to a dozen or more of the modules here. But yeah, I love this. This has been it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, I guess I didn't have any other planned questions. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Twilio Quest or fun stories in the development process or sharing it?
Okay, so Thursday through Halloween, we are doing a Halloween event. It's nothing big or dramatic or intense. It's just a very casual, friendly, come hang out with us and enjoy spookiness situation. So we're doing a kickoff stream all day Thursday. So from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will be hosting a stream and I will be bringing on other Twilio developers. I will be bringing on Twilio champions. I will be bringing on developers from the community. I will be doing multiple check-ins with a developer mom who is doing a programming day with one of her kiddos, and where they're going to use Twilio Quest as the programming curriculum. And we're going to check in with them throughout the day and find out how they're doing. We're going to have Christine on. She's going to do a robot autopsy for us, which I am really excited about. So it's just going to be like very hallway track situation. Definitely everybody should come hang out in the stream, hang out in the chat, have a good time. There will be opportunities to win fun prizes. There might be costumes, no promises, but there might be costumes. And at the end of the first day of, we're calling it Twilio Quest Spooky Fest. I thought of that. I think I'm funny. That's how I roll. So at the end of that first stream day, the top 5 high scores I will ship them out spooky Twilio Quest care packages, and then the top 5 high scores at midnight on Halloween PST. Those top 5 high scores will get a holiday themed Twilio Quest care package, and I will also donate $100 to a local food bank or shelter in their area.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the holiday spirit brought in with the whole process here. I love it. And Halloween being an amazing holiday, under celebrated. I love the spooky themes here. But no, that's awesome. I love it's fun to like kind of engage in those kinds of the reminiscing about the in-person events that I've been missing. I'm like, we'll be back to them. We're getting there, but have it like still engaging and checking in with people you get to do at a real event. That's or in-person event. That's always fun.
Totally. And I'm very excited about these care packages. I really hope a lot of people like join the event and I get to send these out, because basically when we stopped doing in-person events, I still had my entire arcade prize counter stock. So, and I'm really into holidays. So I've got all sorts of like themed arcade prizes. So I'm like, oh, please come play with me so that I can send out these care packages, because I need this in my life. So yes, please come feed my need for holiday themed events.
All good. That's very, very fun. I love that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's awesome. Cool. We will be sure, if you want to send me links, we'll add it to the VOD here, and descriptions for the videos, so we can engage and drop that in our Discord as well, since that's coming up in just a couple days here. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us here. We'll wind down a little bit. This has been first and foremost getting the kind of experience and engagement that we're looking for. We are trying to democratize tech education and make it more accessible, and Twilio Quest, if not, has easily been the best example of, there's intro content and here is exactly, I can send you a single link and you will learn multiple programming languages and tools just by like reading your page or two and downloading the game and playing it for a bit. So totally appreciate the work you've done. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We will be holding a boot camp to learn Intro to JavaScript, playing that boot camp through Twilio Quest, and some additional content that we've added just to supplement that throughout the week between streams. We'll have a couple Twilio engineers as support, kind of hosting office hours and being mentors, and people can build their own projects in the last couple of weeks and kind of showcase that in a kind of capstone style thing. So again, thank you, Margaret, for joining us. We'll be sure to share all your links in our description here and on the Twitch and YouTube pages. I want to make sure I get both of them because I always forget. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch in the future as we ship the camp coming up soon.
Awesome. This was super fun. Thanks for having me.
All righty. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Margaret.